You ever have one of those moments where you're so stunned, so angry, that you actually go quiet? That was me, standing by the pool, watching Patricia wave a violation notice at me like she was handing out parking tickets on a power trip. "Your daughter can't wear that in the pool," she said, her voice sticky sweet but laced with judgment. Amina, my little girl, just trying to swim with her headscarf, water dripping down her cheeks, stood there, trembling, staring at the concrete. I let the silence stretch, just long enough for her confidence to wobble. Then I leaned in and said, "Calm as you please. You might want to check the state code before you hand me that." "Yeah, that happened." Her eyes flickered, just for a second, then snapped back, all HOA president mask. But the damage was done. A little seed of doubt. That's all I needed. "See, I'm Daniel Rahman, structural engineer by trade, certified expert in not letting things fall apart," and I could quote building code in my sleep. But this wasn't about technicalities. This was about my kid, and the last promise I made to my late wife. Never let Amina feel ashamed of who she is. Not ever. That scarf was more than just fabric. It was legacy, memory, defiance wrapped around her head. And Patricia wanted to strip that away with a smirk and a form letter. I felt my daughter's hand squeeze. Mine, damp and cold, and all I wanted was to scoop her up and bolt. But I stood my ground. Not just for her, but for every neighbor watching, every kid who might be next. Let me back up a sec. Willow Creek used to be the kind of place where you left your front door unlocked, and everybody knew whose dog pooped on which lawn. Now, Patricia had turned it into a minefield of violation notices and whispered complaints. That night, after the pool, the house felt small, suffocating. Amina curled up on the couch, towel wrapped around her hair, eyes on the muted TV. I banged around the kitchen, making noise so I wouldn't have to say what we were both thinking, that Patricia had taken something from us. And when I stepped outside to clear my head, I caught Mrs. Jenkins dragging a dead flower pot inside, muttering about being fined for the wrong color petunias. Across the street, Mr. Garcia was on his second round of shutter repainting because Patricia changed her mind about the approved palette. The neighborhood wasn't just tense, it was scared. But here's the thing about bullies. They push until somebody pushes back. And I had every intention of being that somebody. The next HOA meeting, I sat near the back, notebook in hand, scanning the board. Marcus Lee caught my eye. A younger board member, sharp suit, looking like he desperately wanted to disappear every time Patricia spoke. When she launched into her rant about pool attire policy, Marcus looked like he was chewing glass. I watched him, fingers tapping, jaw tight, recognizing that look. I'd seen it in rookie engineers who spotted a disaster coming but were too scared to speak up. He was the fracture in her perfect wall. Meeting adjourned, neighbors shuffled out grumbling. Violation notices fluttering like autumn leaves. Patricia strutted, soaking up the fear. But Marcus lingered. We didn't talk, not then. Timing is everything. Instead, I went home, pinned my latest violation to the corkboard, and started digging. If Patricia was using bylaws as weapons, I'd find the chink in her armor. And sure enough, 2 days later, Marcus showed up in my garage, jittery as a cat. "She's been targeting you," he muttered, glancing around like the walls had ears. He'd voted for her once, thought she'd keep things organized. Now she was making his life hell. Over his wife's potted plants, his daughter cried when they had to throw them away. But here's the kicker. Marcus used to be board secretary. He knew the rules, and he'd kept the receipts. Patricia, it turned out, had never properly filed half the amendments she loved waving around. Legal loopholes everywhere. All it would take was proof. I hit the county clerk's office like a man on a mission. Took maybe an hour to find what I needed, a stack of proposed amendments with no official county stamp, no real legal standing. I printed them out, clutching that stamped receipt like it was a golden ticket. On the way out, I even grabbed a flyer from a homeowners' rights group. Allies were everywhere if you knew where to look. Armed with evidence, I started gathering allies, Sophia with her ugly trellis, Tom and Julia with their unauthorized mailbox, neighbors tired of being steamrolled. Even Marcus, finally ready to speak, handed me his original board minutes, the real ones. Not the sanitized version Patricia filed. My daughter watched me, quiet but hopeful. "Does this mean we don't have to hide the kayak anymore?" she asked. "Nope, not ever again." By the night of the meeting, the clubhouse was packed. Patricia tried her best to control the room, but the air had changed. People leaned forward, not back. Sophia spoke up first. I want to hear Daniel. When I stood, projector humming, I let the evidence do the talking. Dates, signatures, receipts. When Patricia barked, I stayed calm. And when Marcus stood up and told his story, how she bullied, lied, skirted every rule, you could feel the dam break. Neighbors didn't just nod. They cheered. But the final boss fight wasn't over. Patricia fired off a lawsuit, dragging me into court for disrupting the neighborhood. The courtroom was packed, neighbors filling every bench, Marcus at my side, Sophia squeezing my hand. Patricia's lawyer barked about community standards, but when the judge asked for proof, they choked. Your Honor, may I present Exhibit A? I slid the certified filings forward. Marcus gave his affidavit, voice shaking but clear. Patricia sputtered, denied, deflected. The judge ruled, amendments invalid, fines void, costs on the plaintiff. Patricia's power vanished in the slam of a gavel. As we stepped into the sun, neighbors shook my hand, hugged my daughter. The war was over, but the work had just begun. The next weekend, Willow Creek felt different. Laughter from backyards, neighbors waving, walls coming down. Sophia handed me coffee by the old oak. Marcus apologized for waiting so long to stand up. I told him, you spoke up when it counted. Kids chalked flowers on driveways. No more hiding. Later, at a cul-de-sac cookout, no agenda, no rules. Just music and stories. I looked around and realized this was the real victory. Not just beating Patricia, but reclaiming dignity, trust, the simple joy of belonging. I stood up, speaking to my neighbors and to everyone listening, because you know what? Every neighborhood has a Patricia. But when we remember who we are, when we stand together, we win every time. So if you've ever tangled with an HOA tyrant or seen power abused, drop your story in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, what you'd have done differently, if you think justice was served, or if the fight's just getting started. Because this isn't just my story. It's ours. And it's far from over you'd think after winning in court, after seeing Patricia pack up her clipboard and that forced smile. We'd all just relax, right? But let me tell you, neighborhoods don't heal overnight, especially when people have been holding their breath for years, afraid to step on the wrong blade of grass or plant the wrong color flower. The morning after the verdict, I half expected to find a new notice tacked to my door, some last desperate gasp of control. Instead, I opened it to sunlight and quiet. No knock, no glares, just Amina standing at the table, pouring herself cereal like she finally belonged here. That's when it really hit me. Freedom doesn't come with confetti and speeches. It comes with small, ordinary moments you'd almost stopped hoping for. Over the next week, you could feel the neighborhood stretching, waking up, testing the boundaries of what was actually possible. People I barely knew started waving as I walked Amina to the bus. Mrs. Jenkins put her bright purple petunias back in their pot by the mailbox. Tom put out his old metal chairs again, those ugly green ones Patricia always hated, and invited me over for a beer. Even the air felt lighter, like we'd opened a window after years of stale, recycled fear. But it wasn't just sunshine and new friendships. There was uncertainty, too. People kept asking, what happens now? Who's in charge? Will Patricia really stay gone? Or is she lurking, waiting to swoop back in with some technicality? The board called an emergency meeting, and this time, it wasn't behind closed doors. I sat up front with Marcus and Sophia, my box of court documents right there for everyone to see. Patricia's old crew, the ones who always nodded along, just sat there, quiet, avoiding eye contact. The energy was different, tense, but not angry. Like folks were finally ready to talk about what went wrong instead of pretending everything was fine. Sophia stood up, voice shaking but proud, and said what everyone was thinking. If we rebuild this board, it has to be for all of us, not just a handful. Marcus followed, explaining how easily power twists when it isn't watched, how silence is its own kind of vote. Someone asked me if I wanted to be president. I laughed hard. I fix bridges, I said. I'll help you lay the foundation, but I don't need a throne. Amina grinned at that. She'd been quiet for days, but seeing neighbors actually listen to each other, hearing grown-ups admit they'd been scared too, something loosened inside her. We formed a committee, neighbors from every corner, folks who'd been fined and folks who'd just kept their heads down. Our first goal: rewrite every bylaw, every policy, in plain English, and make sure everyone's voice counted. No more meetings where only 3 people decided for everyone. No more weaponized rules. We posted drafts on the community board and online, left comment cards at people's doors, even held a backyard barbecue where folks could vent and joke and brainstorm over hot dogs and lemonade. Turns out, when you give people the chance, they've got a lot to say: stories of old arguments, moments of kindness, things they loved about Willow Creek before fear took over. One evening, Amina and I sat on the porch, watching fireflies and listening to the hum of neighbors chatting late into the night. She leaned against my shoulder, her scarf trailing down her back, and said, "Do you think it'll last this time?" I thought about it for a long moment. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I know it's better to try than to let someone else decide for us." She smiled, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was no shadow in her eyes. Marcus dropped by with his daughter a few days later, little Maya, still shy around crowds. He thanked me for pulling him into the fight, told me he'd been afraid for so long he forgot what it felt like to stand up for something. "You made it possible," he said. I shook my head. "You made the choice. That's what counts." There's something about seeing a grown man find his courage. It's contagious. Soon enough, even folks who'd kept their distance started pitching in, suggesting changes, volunteering to help watch over the neighborhood instead of just watching each other. Patricia? She moved out before the summer was done. Word is, she tried to pull the same act at her new place. But after what happened here, I like to think she'll think twice before telling another little girl what she can or can't wear at the pool. And as the months rolled by, the scars faded slowly, but they did. The kayak stayed by my driveway, and nobody said a word except to ask if they could borrow it. Amina started inviting friends over to swim, headscarf and all, laughing so loud it echoed across backyards. People planted what they wanted: petunias, trellises, lawn chairs, each one a tiny rebellion, or maybe just a way of saying, "We're here. This is ours, too." So yeah, the fight with Patricia was over. But the real story, the reason I'm telling you all this, isn't just about beating one bully. It's about what happens after, when a community decides to stop living in fear and actually chooses to look out for each other. If you've ever been there, if you've got a story like this, or if you're still waiting for your turn to speak up, don't let anyone tell you your voice doesn't matter. It does. Drop your story below, tell me where you're watching from, and let's keep this going. Because the only thing stronger than one person standing up is a whole neighborhood remembering how. You know what I mean?